IVM.
Hey Raghavi, so now we have, World Environment Day is coming up. I wanted to just get a quick, what do you do for sustainability? Like, what's the things that you do for, yourself and for the environment?
Just basic stuff. I try not to buy fast fashion. Like I try to buy mostly thrifted stuff. I use, reusable water bottles.
Yeah.
Oh, and, bamboo products generally, toothbrushes especially are pretty cool. I quite like those as well.
So, the problem with using things which are sustainable is that they're also organic. I also got very caught up in this whole bamboo stuff. And I got a bamboo toothbrush.
Okay.
And I got like a big set. Okay, because I was like, yeah, I'm going to use...
like the set of 4.
Yeah, like
for
I'm
a
going to
family.
use this for 6 months and then I'll use the next one because that's,
Okay.
that's good for my oral hygiene and things like that.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I don't know where I kept it. And because the bamboo toothbrush is made of bamboo and is organic.
No.
After 6 months when I decided to open, it was just covered in fungus.
I hate this. I hate this story. Can we just get to this song? Play the song.
Moral of the story is plan your sustainability initiatives, please. Have you ever wondered why women don't do more crime?
Well, we're here to tell you there's misconduct all the time.
Women are thieves and murderers.
That's gross misconduct.
Con artists, money launderers.
Criminal misconduct.
Financial fraud that's hard to track.
Takes some planning, but still misconduct.
Even breaching a contract.
That's more civil though.
It's misconduct. It's misconduct. We tell you all about women that suck. Things that make you say, what the? It's misconduct.
Hello, and welcome to Misconduct. We are a podcast that talks about Indian women that have committed crimes. But sometimes we talk about women that may not be Indian technically, but they're Indian at heart. And they love this country in a way that you and I probably can't really comprehend because we're not freedom fighters, I guess. Anyway, I am Raghavi.
And I am Nisha. And it's not yet evident, but we will be fangirling a little bit in this episode because today the episode is about Sarala Behn. So Sarala, who was born as Catherine Mary Hellman, was an Englishwoman who lived through the Indian independence movement and fought for the country's freedom in her own right. Influenced heavily by the work of Mahatma Gandhi, Sarala came to India in 1932 and just never went back.
Yeah.
In 1942, when Gandhi started the Quit India movement, Sarala launched an extension of the non-violent movement in her newly established home in the hills, which is like the Kumaon district of Uttarakhand. So her rallying cry brought so many men and women from the hills together that the opposing British forces just put her in jail to like, shh, keep quiet, lady.
Yeah.
Most importantly, we thought it was important to talk about her today because this week is where the entire planet celebrates World Environment Day.
Wait, what? How's that related?
So one additional fun fact about Sarala Behn, that's something that she was known for, it is called the Chipko Movement. So although technically a criminal in the eyes of the British Raj, since she followed Gandhi so closely and she used his principles to rally the people of the hills, Sarala is known as one of India's earliest environmentalists.
Yep.
So her work in environmentalism includes organizing women to protect forest growth, establishing small-scale forest industries that would not stress the forest's natural resources, and most importantly, leading the Chipko movement, which means to hug. Very uwu.
It is uwu.
So in the 1970s, Sarala Behn organized thousands of supporters and volunteers in the forests of Uttarakhand to come together and just hug a tree. Yeah, and I'm assuming these people are not eked out when like a bug crawls on you or something like that. And like, I feel like if I was part of the movement, I'd be like, butterfly, bye. I am leaving.
For those who don't know, Nisha is deathly scared of butterflies, moths, just anything that cocoons out into
It's
wings.
lepidopterophobia. Look it up.
I will actually. I really want to say psychological reasons behind this, but yeah. In any case, hug a tree don't hug a tree if you don't like butterflies.
Yes, correct. Exactly that. So the physical human presence against these trees would ensure that laborers could not cut down the trees because not everyone is that cruel.
Yes.
So Sarala organized this specifically to prevent excessive lumbering and tapping of resin from the pine trees. She also set up this ashram at Kasauli in the Kumaon hills of Uttarakhand.
Right.
She went from village to village helping the families of political prisoners, especially women who were impacted by this. In her later years, she even authored a book which was called Reviving Our Dying Planet.
So the thing is, Sarala essentially, at least what we know now, she essentially started what we call the Eco-Feminist Movement. So women were really disproportionately impacted by excessive felling of forests. At the time, especially because this was the 60s and 70s, women had taken on more traditional roles at the time, right, compared to today. Especially, where in those forest-based economies, agricultural-based economies, those sorts of things. That basically meant that if there was any loss of tree cover, loss of food options within the forests, irrigation issues, lack of access to drinking water, fodder, firewood, there are loads of problems that are associated with this. All of these are problems that women face on a day-to-day basis because they depended on the forests immediately to be able to get these resources. In times, before Sarala as well as even after, the idea of protesting for the sake of the earth sometimes was a crime, sometimes was looked at, sort of like, why are you doing this? Capitalism is the best. And even during the Chipko movement in India, many protesters were physically taken away from the site of the protests and put into jail, just so they wouldn't be killed during the protests. And today we live in a world also where something like this might just be branded as eco-terrorism. So, in fact, actually, we live in a world where a lot of people might not be able to access these forests to begin with. Even if you grew up on that land, you were born on that land, and the forest was rightfully yours to exploit, as your families have done for centuries in a sustainable and wasteless fashion. So, even if Sarala technically wasn't a criminal back in the day.
You mean besides the freedom struggle stuff?
Oh yeah, the freedom struggle stuff is just different. That's what we'll actually cover in this episode. But when it comes to the the eco part of all of this, if she wasn't a criminal then, she would likely be a criminal today, unfortunately.
Before we get into the episode, our usual warnings: podcast is not suitable for children, and listener discretion is advised. Okay, so I'm going to start with the woman. Before she was Sarala Behn, she was Catherine Mary Hellman. Catherine was born on 5th April 1901 in West London. Aries buddies! Her father was a German-Swiss and her mother was English. Catherine was named after her German grandmother. When her mother passed away at a young age, Catherine would live for large chunks of the year with her grandmother, who she loved and she admired. Catherine also had a younger brother, Alfred. Her memories and first-hand accounts of her life say that she was more of the rebellious child between the two. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about early 1900s England, but at the very least, they were extremely racist.
Oh, yeah, I also thought that only. I didn't really go anywhere else with that thought.
Yes. So for one, Britain continued to enslave large populations of the world, something that would only slowly start to unravel as these populations gained like internal political support. And in some cases, they became more violent movements.
I get it.
Another thing was Britain was kind of in a weird warish situation with most of Europe. A political ticking time bomb would soon detonate by 1914, resulting in the First World War. We've all learned that in history.
Do you remember the name of the dude who was assassinated?
Archduke Francis Ferdinand.
Of where?
Of that place.
I think it's Austria.
Austria?
I think it's Austria.
One of those. Was it Austria-Hungary at the time? Prussia?
Prussia was way before that. Wow, CBSE history really did us bad, huh? Whoops.
So, I mean, to be European at this time, living in Britain, it's essentially like a one-way ticket to discrimination station.
Oh my God, I don't want to get off on that station.
So, Catherine's half-German heritage left her with a very black mark, unfortunately. Her father was ostracized by the community at times, and Catherine herself was denied scholarships to the schools that she wanted to go. However, she didn't let this stuff get to her. In her memoir, Catherine says that she still had an open mind with regards to her nationality, identity, language, and appreciated that her parents came from diverse nationalities.
Oh, damn. That's pretty cool.
Right?
If I was that person, I would have just become an X-Men or something. Just like... suppressed my feelings so hard, it would just become wings.
Oh God, my lepidopterophobia is kicking in.
I'm so sorry.
So as we mentioned earlier, Catherine's mum passed away at a young age and her grandmother stepped in to handle the household. Her father, although well-read and accomplished, was not really able to hold a job.
Oh yeah, if you didn't get that for reference, please look up the word racism.
Yes, it's right next to the British Empire.
We can say that now because, they made their own beds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lie in it. And Catherine's grandmother's finances helped them actually quite a bit through this time. So in fact, in her memoirs, Catherine said that her grandmother taught her a lot about self-sufficiency as a woman. And to that I say, go grandma!
Yeah.
That's amazing. I also feel like I learned a lot about self-sufficiency from my grandparents, from my grandma. Both of them specifically. Yeah, one of them was the first lady who worked in a bank in Madurai. And the other one is a master's in physics for her time. And she was a physics teacher. So it's very cool. Yeah.
I learned it from my mom mostly, but also Tina Fey. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was at this time that in her life, when she was with her grandma, she essentially came down to two specific streams of thought. One was that women should be able to stand on their own feet. And if they can't, they should be taught how to do that.
All right.
And the second is that the racial divides are irrelevant if we can all aim to live harmoniously as the human race.
Oh my God. That was some model MUN level.
I know.
Model MUN? No.
No, model United Nations.
Model United Nations. That's right.
It's the model United Nations where only like Bella Hadid and Gigi Hadid. Go ahead.
So all of that stuff that she was going through, what she was thinking about, that stuff seems pretty obvious now, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't be terrible to people. But this is the early 1900s, and being terrible was effectively
cool.
Yeah, it really was. Also, I think in some way trademarked by the British. So this kind of thinking.
Oh, we're doing that this year.
This entire episode, just this. So this kind of thinking, especially like, the idea of emancipation of women and treating all humans as one, that's some very progressive thinking.
Agreed.
Yo.
Agreed.
No, seriously, because like in the last set of laws that allowed women to vote without any restriction in the UK, they passed in 1928.
That's not too far away.
Yeah, and the discrimination of people based on color and race, that was only barred in 1965.
That's so jarring, right?
Yeah, it was right here.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I say 2020 was 200 years ago, but
1965 is closer.
Yes. That's true. And the thing is, we think all this stuff happened way in the past, but it was less than a century ago.
Yeah.
In any case, Catherine, at this time, she did manage to finish school. The one thing that really irked her and really hurt her as well was the fact that she couldn't score a scholarship to study any further. And this, like, it's really terrible to hear this, but this is what her school's headmistress told her at the time, all right? She said, listen, Catherine, it's been decided that as your family are on the enemy's side, you cannot receive a scholarship. The decision is also the right one, for as you are not helping in the war effort, you can give more time to study and therefore have a much better chance of winning than those girls who are active in the war effort.
Oh, I think something we forgot to mention. Catherine's family were pacifists.
Right.
They believe that it's never right to take part in the war, even if it's in self-defense.
Yeah, and of course, add the fact that her dad was not technically British by birth, so that did not help as well. So by the time the mid, 1920s rolled around, Catherine, although she was eager to learn and grow, she wasn't given that option.
Yeah.
So at the age of 16, she started working as an office clerk, which was really the only job she could get with her education. And the fact that she was basically branded an enemy. Right?
Yeah.
It also didn't help that Catherine had sort of grown like disillusioned with this ridiculously insane industrial growth within Britain and Europe as well.
I mean, I have conflicting thoughts with Catherine, but I get it for its time. Even in her memoir, she wrote, like, coming into close contact with factories, I only became even more disturbed. Seeing the unnatural environment of the factory, the deafening noise, the people made slaves by the sheer spread of machines, I suffer a lot. The thought came to me that when I make use of the items produced in these factories, in a way, I too am part of this inhuman process. Was it for all of this that humanity exists?
Oh, yikes. Also, I think just to be on the safe side, guys, Catherine lived in a time when labor laws didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand. It's a little different today. We can't just let people die in factories. Also, 11-year-olds are not,
Yes. Most importantly.
Yeah. So think about it from that time when if you were a child and you were asked to work in a factory, and at this age you look at it, you're obviously going to be really disillusioned by it. So Catherine also wrote in her diary at this time about how she dreamed of living a very peaceful life in the countryside and making her life one of self-sufficiency.
And that's how it was until...
Oh no.
Tragedy struck. So
What?
after the First World War, Catherine lost her grandma. This personal loss kind of threw her into despair. And in the mid-20s, after an elaborate argument with her father, she just left home and ran away. This was around the time that she decided to work at her clerk position. Now, this position, which she hated, by the way, she did find one good thing. She met a handful of students who had come from India to study in Britain. So she participated in active political and sociological debates with them, and they introduced her to the various forms that the Indian independence struggle was taking. So from like pacifist to extremist to Gandhian, and she was sort of intrigued by this. So at this time she wrote in her diary, imperialism and colonialism were presented to me in a new light. In our history books, Indians were always referred to within the context of the white man's burden. Now, though, I begin to understand that we were in India not for the benefit of the people there, but for their exploitation. And that having destroyed their culture, we now sought to impose our own.
Ew.
I mean, I love the way it's put across. Also, who writes like this in their diary, dude? Like, I opened my diary, it's like, dear diary, today my sister wore my favorite jeans. I'm so angry at her.
I actually remember when we were really young and Nisha gifted me a little notebook of sorts. It had a little lock on it.
Yeah.
As a diary, yeah.
I had one.
My lock
too.
was pretty useless. You could probably bite it off with your teeth. Okay, it was pretty dumb. Or you could just tear the paper off of the book and the lock would just come off. In any case, I never used it. It's still there in my box of curiosities, along with this letter that Nisha wrote, which started with, "Hey, what is up?"
Yeah.
In a letter.
What? Wonderful. Like, I was expecting you to reply. Like, I'm Dora the Explorer.
In this snail mail. They didn't even send by mail. You sent it with your mum
I
to
did.
my house.
Yes,
like,
correct.
I don't have an address to respond to now. But back to her.
Yes,
Wow,
to
alright,
Sarala Behn. I'm glad she had this kind of realization way back then.
That's true.
And like, you know, that she was in like so clear about this philosophy of, oh, we're the bad guys. Right.
And
Am
she
I
was
the
correct.
villain? I'm not the villain. Maybe I am. But yeah, in particular, the Gandhian principles of nonviolence and self-sufficiency really appealed to her.
Right.
So she is quoted as saying, for the first time in my life, I was exposed to the ideas that resonated within me. So things happened very quickly after this. By 1929, she had assured herself that the Gandhian principles just were the way to go.
Right.
By 1930, she heard accounts of Gandhi leading the Dandi March against the salt tax in India. In 1931, one of her friends from her job who had moved back to India asked her to come down to help with teaching some of the local school children in the city of Udaipur in Rajasthan.
Nice.
Later that year, Catherine picked up several courses on child education. Gandhi was also in London for the Roundtable Conference that year, but she couldn't meet him. But it was no matter to her because she told herself that she would meet him in India.
Nice.
And in 1932, she was in India.
Sweet. This is one of those episodes where we got to know a lot about the woman beforehand.
Yeah.
Especially what fueled her.
Mhm.
As I was writing for this, I remembered Durga Bhabi and the fact that we don't know much about her early life.
Yeah.
We just know that she was radicalized casually by her husband and Bhagat Singh. But why? How? What
Yeah.
did she think through all of that? But we have that here, I guess. It's nice to be a white woman.
Oh.
I mean, people want to know about your story, okay? People just don't want to know about people of color and their stories. It sucks, but
I think
it
we
is
should
what it
take a
is.
break before we get cancelled.
Fine. Whatever, man. Fine, let's take a break. We'll see you guys after this.
We face 100 dilemmas every day while raising our children and nurturing our families. Why not let science help us make informed decisions to solve our dilemmas? Hi, I'm Devi Shobha.
And I'm Meghna. We host Big Talk About Tiny Humans, where we will help you unpack challenges around parenting and your child's development.
And more importantly, we will equip you with research-backed strategies that you can readily act on.
Tune in to our podcast every Wednesday on the IBM Podcasts app, website, or your favorite podcast platforms.
Welcome back after the break, everyone. Let's now look at Catherine's life in India. And how she became Sarala Behn and how she got all caught up in the Indian independence struggle. So in India, Catherine worked for almost 4.5 years at Vidya Bhavan. It's this progressive school in Udaipur. And it was sort of founded on the idea of social reconstruction through education.
Okay.
Which you hear is fancy because it was. Because over time, she sort of realized that the school catered only to upper middle class Indians and not like folks that she thought needed true upliftment. She also couldn't participate in Gandhi's own programs because she was at the school. And she felt like her purpose in India wasn't really like being met. But, because she was a little frustrated, during her free time, she used to work for quite a few women's causes, especially those in communities that, not just needed money and jobs, but also education and access to basic things like water and hygiene. So also, this sometime in Udaipur, when she was around, she changed her name to Sarala.
Yeah.
And she was formally referred to as Sarala Behn at this time. Sarala also eventually did meet Gandhi. Now, we won't focus too much on this, mostly because, dude, like, people have very polarizing opinions about Gandhi.
Which is fair. I mean, he is a political figure as well, and he's said and done things that agree with some people and don't agree with others. So it's okay.
Wow. You can't be mad at us now, everyone. We were very diplomatic about it. Ha ha ha, you wanted to rage. That did happen. In any case, Sarala Behn did meet Gandhi in 1936. And then she stayed at his ashram for about 5 years. And she sort of helped him put together many aspects of his non-cooperation and non-violent movements. Remember that she was particularly well-versed in political sciences because of her early years especially. In 1941 though, Gandhi sort of inspired her to move to another place and start her own form of seva, something that she could build on her own. And this is when Sarala moved to Kumaon in Uttarakhand. And she recalls specifically thinking at this time, it felt like I was renouncing the world to go and live in the forest. And in a way, she did.
So Sarala Behn spent a year there learning like local languages, figuring out walking routes, getting herself accustomed to the mountain air. Right, while Sarala Behn was in Kumaon, she started working towards the upliftment of the local women. One way she did this was by realizing the potential for hand-spun wool, similar to Gandhi's spinning of khadi as a form of local trade.
Right.
So Tibetan wool just made more sense than khadi because of the weather and the access to raw materials. She also noted a discrepancy in the amount of work that women did towards agriculture versus men. Sure, men are doing the plowing and, manage the irrigation of the fields. But the women did practically all agricultural operations, working in their fields and their forests in sun, rain and frost, weeding, harvesting, carrying heavy loads of fuel, fodder, litter, from basically early dawn to falling dusk to sustain their family. So this she was less sure about. How do you rewire generations of customs? I mean, how many of us haven't thought of that, right? For so many other things. Yeah. Plus, she wasn't actually Indian.
Right.
So with her like German, Swiss, English heritage, she was very, very evidently Caucasian. She was basically a slice of cheese there. And it's very unlikely that the local population would trust her. But all that would change with the Quit India movement.
Yay, we're at the crime spot.
Yes, but crimes in a very specific sense. And that is that the British forces did not like her.
Boo! Well, I don't like you, British forces.
I bet they're like, oh my God, we didn't like you in our country. We don't like you here also.
Where did she get to go? Australia, I guess. That's where they all went.
Isn't that a British prison?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
I see. So on 8th August 1942, the All India Congress Committee launched the Quit India movement, which resolved to get the British out of India as quickly as possible. So this is the first time that the nation sort of came together to sort of agree on something regarding the freedom struggle.
Right.
Although there will still be factions within the freedom fighters, it would be pretty clear that the goal was common.
Yeah, get the Brits out.
Simon, go back.
Leave. Pora.
So the British response to the Quit India movement was swift. The Indians involved attacked 550 post offices, 250 railway stations, damaged many rail lines, destroyed 70 police stations and burned or damaged 85 other government buildings. There were about 2,500 instances of telegraph wires being cut. The government of India deployed 57 battalions of British troops to restore order.
Oh God.
Within 6 weeks, the police and the British army crushed the rebellion.
Oh man.
Yeah. And many nationalist leaders were imprisoned for the duration. Sarala, of course, was one of the leaders.
Oh, yes. So, Sarala, as you remember, was actually a pacifist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, involving herself in any form of protest or war would have technically been against her principles.
Yeah.
However, as the Quit India movement picked up, she decided she wanted to participate as well. Except Gandhi didn't want her to initially. So, he specifically did not want foreigners to be political supporters for India. And this irked Sarala Behn quite a bit. I get where he was coming from because it is primarily an Indian movement, right?
Also, just from like optics.
Yeah, exactly.
From a PR standpoint.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. From a legal standpoint, it sounds like crazy ass discrimination to me. So, when Guy didn't want her to do this, it sort of irked her a little bit. But by the time the movement reached the hills, Sarala had to really quickly choose because the movement was very, very quick.
Yeah.
It was either agree with Gandhi and, just do not engage or support the movement, or rely on her self-respect to disobey Gandhi and do what she needed to do. Unfortunately, something happened that had sort of made the decision for her. So on 2nd September 1942, 15 workers of her ashram were arrested and their properties were confiscated and their ashram was sealed. So they were arrested and actually tried on false charges for an arson attack on a government resin depot in Tota Shilling. Now, the British Revenue Office apparently sort of orchestrated the whole scam. So that's what we mean when we say that they were false charges.
Yeah.
The district judge imposed fines on those arrested and it came up to a total of 30,000 rupees, which is a hella lot of money today also, man.
Yeah, I agree.
And this is also 7 times the annual rent of that entire area.
Whoa.
Yeah, plus the workers, they were imprisoned without a specific date of release.
Yeah, and this sufficiently pissed off Sarala Behn, and we get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mad right now. And I wrote this episode. And I know I was going to say this.
So as a form of protest, she prepared a petition against these actions and collected 1 anna from each of the families in the area and set out to see the English commissioner in Nainital. She was, of course, granted permission to see the commissioner because she white. But she stood in front of him and said, I have come with the humble request that justice be done for the sake of humanity, for those who are innocent, so that future history does not stigmatize the English for doing this injustice to people. I have to say, brave attempt, but girl.
Yeah, little.
The scale is a little.
Just march to the commissioner and
One
be like,
small thing is not going to fix it.
but she's trying.
She's trying. She's trying. Sure. So the commissioner heard this and apparently expected her to beg and be pathetic about the whole situation. Instead, what he received was Adiga Prasangitanam.
Yay!
Or audacity.
I love that.
Her words pissed off the commissioner so much that he ordered all the members of the ashram just be jailed for her insubordination.
What?
Yeah, I remember that this is the time that when any words were against the British Empire, they were all considered blasphemous.
Oh, that's right. Actually, yes. So the English had passed sedition laws that, by the way, are still in use by the Indian government. At the time, they were aimed at suppressing any form of dissent. The original law even uses the words exciting disaffection against the government. Disaffection. Like if I walked up to the commissioner and I said, girl, you're bad. He could have had me jailed. Even though, I mean, it's not anything specific. It's just like, girl, you suck. And then I would be in jail, you know?
Yeah. And he could have said that to Sarala Behn. I mean, he could have had Sarala Behn jailed as well.
Yeah.
Because she walked up to him and basically like tupped on his face. Right? Also quick fun fact. Censorship in the British era was pretty common too. There are some 10 legislations specifically aimed at censoring the press. These included the Vernacular Press Act, the Censorship of Press Act, the Metcalfe Act, the Indian Press Act, the Licensing Regulations, the Registration Act, and so many more. Not to mention like ad hoc decisions to stifle the press. Like, oh no, I accidentally tripped and burnt down an entire printing press of this local newspaper. Oops, I'm so clumsy, guys.
Oh, I'm just a baby.
Just a baby.
So the problem was, how are the British supposed to handle a woman who is one of their own, a British woman, and also opposed their government? It's a little confusing for them. Remember how in our Durga Bhavi episode, we said the British didn't understand how to deal with women because they didn't realize that they could do things. Like they were like, oh my gosh, she stepped out of her house. Now it's another layer, right? This is a well-spoken, well-read English woman who is like, hey, stop it. And they're just like, what? Me? What? So the thing is that loads of supporters of the Indian independence struggle. And some of these sympathizers were British themselves.
Yeah.
But their nationality meant that you kind of couldn't use the same laws in India to punish them. Because a lot of these laws were made with discrimination in mind.
I wonder how that works.
It's great. Just great. So the thing is, when you're trying to prove any of these against an actual British person, the onus of proof becomes much, much higher. And, the police might actually have to follow procedure. Oh no, it's so hard. And on one such occasion, the commissioner apparently, just out of spite, wanted to have Sarala arrested. But he couldn't procure a search warrant for her home. If this was not one of, the British folks,
yeah,
they would have just burst into that house, burned the thing down and said, like Nisha said, oops, I slipped and fell,
Oops, I did it again.
I disappeared again. And this sort of gave Sarala some time, to think about how she wanted to use her influence to help the British.
Nice.
Because she realized she had that time on her hand. So over the next few weeks, Sarala would basically use her knowledge of the court system and her command over English to attend the political trials of many of the men and women that were arrested in the hills during the Quit India movement. She's actually on record as having saved at least 2 men from death sentences. She also campaigned to have the fines of prisoners reduced as much as possible. She also traveled along, the narrow passageways of forests to reach all these towns where she could hire lawyers. She also traveled to meet prisoners in jails in Bareilly and Lucknow and Agra, all in Uttar Pradesh, which are hundreds of miles from her home, just to bring, news of them back to their families and to their lawyers.
Wow.
And she also, this wasn't easy for her to do. She still had to avoid certain kinds of easier form of travel like buses and trains. She couldn't take those because she knew the British forces would find her. They would intercept her. And if they found one document on her to prove that she was an Indian sympathizer, she would be sent to jail too.
Except that the Brits didn't want to wait for all of that. After a point, they just preemptively decided that Sarala Behn was just too much trouble for her own good.
Oh, yeah.
And they put her under house arrest at her home in Kumaon for allegedly helping native political revolutionaries. To this, Sarala Behn said, "You can't tell me what to do."
Nah.
And she just walked right out of her house. Not even in disguise or anything. She just bah. So she left. And she was continuing to do her work for the prisoners. To add insult to injury, also as a form of civil disobedience, Sarala would go down to the district magistrate's office every time that she left her house. She would literally pop down there and be like, "Lol, I'm outside." Like that annoying cat that you thought was locked up inside the house. It's how did you get out again?
How?
A few weeks later, surprise, she was arrested.
Oh!
She was on her way to Allahabad to appeal the High Court for arresting certain prisoners. So for her arrest, a trial was held. She was sent to jail for 3 months. And as soon as she came out, she started doing it again. And she was placed in house arrest again.
Oh!
And then she would get out again. And then get arrested again. And go to jail again. So this story just repeated itself for a while. It's like, Dormammu, I've come to bargain. For 2 years. She ended up spending 2 years in prison.
Oh, damn.
So one cute story we heard was about how a witness saw her climbing up a tree to avoid being spotted by the British. Just picture the scenario. It's a small woman clad in a sari, just oh my God, someone's coming, jumping up into a tree at the sight of any army man. I think it's kind of hilarious.
That's true. Oh my God, that's really cute though.
Indeed. In 1947, of course, India received independence. But till that point, there were thousands of Indians wrongfully imprisoned for their contributions to the Quit India movement and other movements that followed it. So while Sarala never aligned herself with more extremist versions of our revolution.
Yeah, we had Durga Bhavi for that.
Yes, we did. She did do what she could for the community that she swore to protect. And even though these antics were kind of insane and funny, the commissioner termed her as the most dangerous person in the district.
Okay.
Yeah. So we wanted to close this section by quoting from an article by Bidisha Malik in a French journal whose name we cannot pronounce.
I tried.
I can do the accent, but I got a lot of flack from the Gens Valoir episode. To all of the haters who did not like my accent, please stay.
Yeah, please don't leave us.
Don't leave us. So this basically, Bidisha Malik, she wrote an article titled Sarala Behn, the Silent Crusader, in which she says, like a true missionary, Sarala traveled from village to village, consoling distraught families of those incarcerated who were left high and dry without any resource or means of survival. Organizing help of all sorts, such as bringing messages to family members from their loved ones in jail, arranging to send their children to school, caring for the sick and the disabled, and providing food and ration, such as rice and wheat, which she often carried herself as headloads.
Wow, that's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. On that note, I think we should take a break because IVM has some amazing samosas, which I've been eating while Raghavi was talking, and I would like 5 minutes to finish it. So let's come back after the break.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita discussed the Twitter sting operation and Jack Ma pulling out of Paytm. On Capgemini's Techipedia series, Sheila Aditya speaks to Anand Chandramouli and Deepak Solanki about sustainable harvesting practices through digital farming. On The Wire Talks, Siddharth talks to author and translator Navdeep Suri about the partition and the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. On Marathi Khidkitun, the Deshmukhs explore how animals and birds gauge their sense of distance in the environment. And on Big Talk About Tiny Humans, Devi Shobha and Meghna explain the right way to talk to children about sex and sexuality. We've got some exciting news for you. IVM Podcast has launched merchandise and our first line is out now. Head to the IVM Podcast website and click on the Shop tab and check out the first collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media as well. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, wherever you do that, that is really helpful for us. And do remember, you can also check a lot of our shows out on YouTube. If you go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, you get a list of all of our channels. We're also doing a small listener survey, so please do help us out with that. If you go to ivmpodcast.com/survey, it'll help us understand a little bit more about our listeners. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, Jupiter, a digital banking app, and Capgemini. Get the future you want. Thank you so much. Without you guys, this wouldn't be possible.
And welcome back, everyone. The section that we did before the break sort of concludes the crime portion of Sarala Behn's life. Now let's look at the other stuff, which could also make her a criminal today. I don't know. We'll find out. So the Chipko Movement. Now the Chipko Movement has its roots in a very, very dark past. This is a pretty rough story, guys. So trigger warning. In September 1730, yes, you heard me right. 1730, 363 Bishnois, which is actually a Hindu community that's found in North India, they were killed in the village of Kejarli. So they were trying to protect the felling of their forest, which was to be cut down by the Maharaja of Marwar for building his new palace. The Maharaja's minister who arrived at the village, he found that the men and women of the village had stuck themselves to the trees, almost hugging them with their entire bodies. And he ordered that the villagers be killed, and hundreds died in the clash. So due to the sacrifice, the Maharaja eventually agreed not to fell the trees. But dude, the damage is done.
Yeah, that just feels like, at least, I mean, now you might as well build your land on the, whatever, your palace over there. Now that you've destroyed everything.
Everything, right? And it's just...
And have the ghosts haunt your Aranmane.
For a house, yeah. It's for a damn house. That's how you get a haunted house.
Yes.
And the Chipko movement, by the way, in India, it came under many leaders and Sarala Behn was one of them leading it. It also emerged sort of from Sarala's own philosophies of self-sufficiency because the land is what allowed them to be self-sufficient.
Right.
If the trees didn't exist, if the land didn't exist for them, then, you know, they didn't have a livelihood.
Yeah.
And women led this movement primarily through various protests. The most famous one, of course, was the characteristic tree hugging. There are other forms of protest, which include fasting and also booby trapping the forests.
Nice.
Which feels very Indiana Jones of them. My personal favorite, though, is these women just stole the tools of the loggers. Like they were like, where's my saw?
Bye. I saw it last in the river.
So at the time, the Chipko movement became, like, it gained a lot of media traction, especially. So, you know, what happened in 1730? The government can't do that again. There are people watching now. There are laws, you know, you can't just kill people like that. So it became really hard for the government to use any form of, you know, violent sort of oppression against these people. Also, remember when we said earlier that Sarala did not know how to bring the women of the hills together?
Yeah.
She kind of achieved that now. It took many, many years, but she got there.
She got there. That's what's important.
Yeah. And I think what's important here is also how Sarala Behn, like, though an Englishwoman herself, she wasn't one of those people who tried to bring modernity to India. You know, she wasn't like aggressive about the whole, why don't you just go to a city or join a factory, you know? That wasn't where she came from. The idea of English feminism especially around this time was very different from the Indian version.
Yeah.
Because the circumstances are different,
Of
right?
course.
I mean, sure, I don't want to, trivialize anything. Women across the world are disadvantaged and disenfranchised.
Yeah.
That is a universal truth, right? But the type of disenfranchisement would be very, very different from different women from different communities, which is why it's also important feminism to be intersectional. Right?
Yeah.
Different women from different backgrounds experience the whole political, economic, personal and social equality of the sexes very, very differently.
Yeah.
So it's really refreshing to read that Sarala Behn, for all her work, did not bring a westernized sort of notion of feminism to the economically impoverished areas of North India. Instead, she brought this sort of notion of self-sustenance and reaping from the earth in a more sustainable fashion, which is more true to the people of that area as well. They wouldn't have had to leave. This is their home.
Yeah.
So that is what they needed.
That's very cool. I like that. But I guess we can start to see traces of that even in her like initial diary inputs, right? Where she's talking about like, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? The things that they're currently doing is not going to work. So I guess it's nice that she took the time out to understand what the particular land actually needs.
Yeah.
And then do that. So
are you saying that a college education and then real life experience can help?
I guess. But you also have to be open-minded. I mean, I know a lot of
Fair.
people who have a college life and a real life experience who still are unable to relate to actual problems.
Yeah, I get that.
Right? So you have to have that mentality. Which
This is literally the plot of Swadesh. As I said it, I realized it.
Yes.
Have
correct.
you watched that movie, Nisha?
I have.
I know, because Shah Rukh Khan's in it, huh? Loser.
And he's so good looking in that.
Oh my God. I think it's late 30s Shah Rukh Khan and just...
Oh no, much older.
Wow,
I
we
think.
failed the Bechdel test so quickly.
God,
Right now.
every single time.
We're really bad at this.
Yeah.
Are we bad feminists?
There's no such thing as bad feminists.
Aha, perfect. Yes.
So now that we're so happy, in July 1982, Sarala Behn passed away in Dharamgarh in Uttarakhand. She lived in a small cottage in her last years and she insisted on being cremated according to the Hindu rites. Today, she is referred to as the daughter of the Himalayas and the mother of social activism in Uttarakhand. Her influence is known across the hills, but to a select few.
Right.
And in 2006, to keep her legacy alive, the government of Uttarakhand announced that it would set up a Sarala Behn Memorial Museum in Kasoni. It's temporarily closed today because of the COVID pandemic.
Okay.
But listeners, if anybody lives in that area and you know when it's open and if you plan to go there, please visit and then send us pictures so that we can vicariously live through you.
Yeah.
And every year, in fact, the Lakshmi Ashram that she spent her last few years in, it commemorates her death anniversary by holding a symposium in her name. And in this symposium, they actually sit and discuss social and environmental issues of the particular area.
Nice.
So Sarala Behn's influence is important, even if it is largely been forgotten. In fact, many textbooks from the Indian Central Board of Secondary Education that we already have comments on and certain state syllabi like include Sarala Behn's achievement in the field of environmental activism.
Right.
We saw references to her in a Tamil Nadu state English textbook on the 8th grade. Many environmentalists today cite her as an important figure for the country's movement against ecological overuse and overdependence. And we can say that with some certainty that her actions, if repeated today, would effectively be seen as eco-terrorism.
Yeah.
Don't believe us? Well, in 2017, India was listed as the 4th deadliest country for environmental activists in a report prepared by Global Witness. So among the 16 activists killed in the country, a considerably large portion were for those protesting mining and logging industries.
Oh, man.
Although this is not an India-specific problem,
Right.
to be of taking away of land and resources from public utilities and aiming to privatize them. So when communities are prevented from using their own local lands in a way that they have through custom for generations, we might be taking away avenues of sustainable ecological growth.
Yeah.
Again, don't believe us? That's fine. You can check out our sources on the blog, which we hope will provide some clarity.
Yeah. And also, if you want to debate this out, we're
Yeah.
obviously very happy to do that because this is not, it is also a podcast for opinions, but for stuff like this, stuff that's scientific.
Yeah.
This is a podcast for facts.
Yes.
Everything has sources, and if we are wrong, tell us why. We're happy
Please.
to debate it out with you.
Yes. Please do tell us why. And we're very, very happy to take this up on our Instagram and talk to you for hours. even if we do take this all with a pinch of salt and maybe even all of the salt made during the Dandi March, we can also assume that environmentalists like Sarala Behn would be rolling in their graves today, thinking about the situation that the world is in right now. And I guess there's nothing sadder than that.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. It's a sad note to end on, but you know what? We like to leave you guys thinking. This is not a podcast for giggles only. Sometimes we make you think. I'm sorry if that's not what you wanted, but...
Yeah, but still stay. Don't leave us.
Yeah, don't leave. Also listen to us on a bunch of other platforms if you'd like. All our old previous episodes are on the IVM Podcast Network. And of course, on any platform you want to watch. Just go listen.
Yeah.
That's all.
And not just listen. Tell us what you think. Review us on Apple Podcasts. Review us on wherever. If there's a random piece of paper somewhere, go review us there also.
Yeah.
Please give us stars on Spotify. We accept nothing less than 5.
We will accept 6 also. Just separately draw a star and send it to our Instagram.
Correct.
That's also fine.
Oh, speaking of Instagram, we are on Misconduct Pod on Instagram. So please go follow us. Leave us notes. Tell us things that you didn't agree with on the episode or something that you strongly agree with on the episode. We're always happy to listen.
That's right. Also, there's a survey out. It's also in our description. It's for whether or not you guys would like to purchase our merchandise, which we call merchasing.
Yeah.
It's a word we invented. Indeed. I'm sure we did not, but here we are. But yes, if you're interested in merchasing, please let us know what you would like. We've given you certain options on what kind of stuff you're thinking about getting, badges, stickers, mugs, that sort of stuff. And of course, you can leave us little notes there about what you would like on the podcast.
Yes.
And that's kind of it. Please do this for us. So if you like any of this stuff, we will try to put it together and merch you out.
Yeah, it only works if we have enough interest. So if we don't have enough interest, we're not buying anything. So go and tell us how much money you'll spend on us. And I hope it's a lot. And we will see you on the next episode of Misconduct.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Vaisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.